everything. And let's jump right into it. So, first question we have two questions that are very similar. So, it's how did you come up with this problem? And with that, how and when did you get into software development?
Okay. So the idea came in 2008 was when I realized that there was a problem. What happened was I was working for a pretty large Fortune 500 company here in Atlanta, and the the company changed auditors from Ernst and Young, from PwC to Ernst and Young. So this was the first time Ernst and Young was performing their audit. As a result, they said, okay, we're going to pay a lot more attention to the financials, right? We're going to take a deeper dive into the financials since it's a first year audit. And one of the areas they looked at was leases. So they tested 10 of the leases, and 10 out of 10 of them were wrong. They tested another 10, and 10 out of 10 of them were wrong. So at this point, we're waiting officer now tasked me with teaching the controllers. This was a global company, so there were different controllers in different profit centers, and so she leases. So in that realm, I started looking at, I'm a big show me, don't tell me. So I created my power, to do a lunch and learn. And then I was like, you know what, rather than telling them how to do it, let me help show them. So I started creating an Excel spreadsheet where you could just input some information and it would spit out the answers. Well, as I'm creating it, I'm like, you know what, this is actually pretty simple accounting. The accounting for this is just like depreciation accounting, right? There has to be software that does this. And it would just make our lives easier if there was. So I looked around for software that I could recommend to the chief accounting officer, and none of them solved the accounting problem. Every single one involved the lease administration problem, but none of them solved the accounting. So I should stress that my role in this company was technical accounting and accounting research. So what that meant is I had to figure out what the new upcoming pronouncements were that the boards were considering, and how do we as a company make sure that we are compliant and we also get our preferred accounting treatment. So in that role, I knew that the rules for lease accounting were changing, right? I knew they were going to be more complex. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, here we are as a company, Fortune 500 company, we're getting it wrong, right? As the auditors have determined. There's no software out there that solves the problem now that's easy. And the problem is about to become a lot more difficult because the boards are about to change the rules, right? So I'm like, so the idea was born at that point, right? Like, why not me, right? If it doesn't exist and it's a difficult problem, and it's a massive problem because every single company leases some sort of asset or another. So the TAM, the total addressable market is massive. And so I figured, that's something that we could exploit. And so we did that.
All right, awesome. And then, so similar to that, once you got this idea, how and when did you get into, software development and the more sort of technical kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I did not get it. I like to joke whenever we have our town hall for all our employees. I always say, I have done every single one of your jobs. And I always put a caveat there that says, except for actual programming. Right? So I am not a programmer by any stretch of the imagination. I am a very, very good BA, the business analyst that tells the programmers what to do, and that's what you need is really, a SME, a subject matter expert. So I'm what you call a subject matter expert who tells the programmers what they need to do. So when as I said, I started the company, I got the idea for the company in 2010. Well, I got the idea in 2008, technically. But what the day I said I am going to actually do this was in March 2010. And at that point, what I did was I increased my contributions to my 401k, right? That means I literally just maxed out my 401k. I was contributing to as much as I possibly could to my 401k with the idea that I would borrow from it, right? Interest-free loan. I would borrow from it and use those proceeds to fund, i.e., pay developers to do it. So that's what I do. By the way, this is terrible financial advice, right? I'm not suggesting anyone there, liquidate their 401k to go start a business. That's not the purpose. But I used it as a vehicle to fund the company in the early stages to get the developing the developers that I obviously could not afford otherwise.
All right, very cool. So moving on, just the questions that sort of go in.
Sure.
I can't skip very far. Sort of as want to sort of guide it so that these questions are sort of as your business is developing. I'm trying to mirror that. So related to that, how did you get the word out about your business, and what were your initial customer acquisition strategies? Did you have strategic partners, anything like that in those early stages?
So how I got the word out. So one of the earlier things I also did was blog, right? I blog and blog and blog. As I said, the first, if you really, I always think the timeline is important because it helps you understand what I was doing in between those stages, right? So if you take a look at the idea that I'm gonna do this, that happened in March 2010. Well, the first line of code was not written until September 2011. So what did I do from 2010, almost 18 months, from March 2010 to September 2011? What I was doing was becoming an expert on the problem, literally immersing myself into the problem, and also writing blogs, right? Because those blogs gave me what's called credibility. The blogs now, if I write a blog about I just had to know what our ICP is. Your ICP stands for your ideal customer profile. So I had to know who is my target audience and what kind of articles would they be interested in. So I would write really, really technical how-to blogs, things that if someone says how to account for tenant improvement allowances, perfect. That was a huge blog for us. And anyone who reads that blog, who spends more than 3 minutes on that blog, tells me a couple of things. A, they have a lease because a tenant improvement allowance is part of a lease. B, they're not using any software, right? Because if they were, they wouldn't be looking for how to account for tenant improvement allowances. The software would just do it automatically, right? And C, they were the people that I needed to talk to within the company, i.e. the controller, the financial reporting manager. So if I could just identify this person, guess what? That is a potential target. So that's how that was the initial strategy. It's really just writing articles and writing blogs. The second thing you said, the part of the question, was how did we go about acquiring said customers? One thing that I read somewhere, I can't remember, but it's something that I did, was do the things that don't scale, right? Do the things that don't scale. So for every customer, every demo that someone said, hey, we want to take a look at your software, I would literally get on a plane and go there to do the demo to them face to face. Now that doesn't scale. You can't do that for everyone. But for our first 20 customers, that is exactly what I did. I was living on the road and going and traveling. And first of all, it's very difficult to tell someone no to their face, especially if you know they just got on a plane to get here, right? And so what I did was, I'd call them and say, hey, can we schedule a demo for next Tuesday? They'll be like, yes, absolutely, let's do it. And so I was like, great, I've gotten the demo. The next day I'd email them and say, hey, guess what? I'll actually be in the Dallas area on Tuesday. Why don't we do this in person? And they'll say, oh yeah, sure, absolutely. And right there and then I'd book. I used to use Southwest Airlines all the time because if they canceled, I would get my money back, right? And there were no change fees, so I would book the flight and I'd fly over there and I would do it in person, right? And so that was how I got our first couple of customers. The third thing that I did then was I watched this documentary on Air Force One, right? And in the documentary on Air Force One, it talked about how many times Air Force One has taken off and landed. Imagine all the presidents during an election year. I mean, just imagine how many times Air Force One takes off and lands. And yet, how many incidents has it had? 0, right? And in the documentary, the takeaway, my takeaway was, that was because everybody from the mechanic to the staff, the steward, the hostess, to the pilot, everybody understood that this was a 0 fail mission, right? And so in my mindset, I said, okay, These first 20 customers, with the amount of investment that I'm putting into it, i.e. traveling over there, taking my time, this is a zero fail mission. It must work. And as a result, as I said, our first customer, I'll tell you this story. Uh, our very first customer, as I said, was a company here called Fresh to Order, and his name was Pierre, and they wanted to see the software, and I was like, oh my god, this is my first demo, very first time I'd shown it to somebody that wants to potentially buy it, right? And so I sat there and ginned up all the things that could go wrong, right? I'm practicing. I drive there the morning of not the morning of. I drove there in the morning to see how much time it'll take me to get there in traffic. I had an extra suit in the car. I had I had everything set, right? Like there was nothing that could possibly go wrong that I didn't have a mitigating scenario. Well, then the night before, literally the evening before, I'm practicing the demo, going through, and a thought ran through my head, like, what if their projector is broken? What happens in this scenario? What do I do? And so I call my mom because I'm broke. I call my mom, and she lived in Houston, and I was like, Mom, I need a projector for the demo tomorrow. And she's like, okay. So she goes to a Best Buy, pays for it at the Best Buy. I pick it up at a Best Buy here in Atlanta and figured out how to use it, the projector, and it's like, okay, good. Next morning, my meeting was at 8 a.m. with them. I get there, and the lady welcomes me, and she's like, okay, here's the conference room where you're going to be doing the demo. And I was like, great, where do I plug in? And she's like, you plug, and she goes, oh my God, we have this new system here that I've never been able to figure out with our projectors. And our IT guy doesn't get here until 9 in the morning. And I was like, oh, well, that's okay. I have a projector with me. And the CEO goes, you have a projector? I go, oh yeah, you're always prepared. And I can almost guarantee you I had won that deal just by virtue of that, right? So just by virtue of being prepared, and there's nothing like that. I mean, companies just want confidence that their problem will be solved, right? And if you can demonstrate that, then you'll be successful. And there's multiple ways to demonstrate success, right? To demonstrate credibility, right? And accountability. So that was one for me.
That's a great story, and I'm definitely going to steal that analogy about Air Force One.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So at this point, like you said, you're doing these demos, you're flying out to all these demos, and so now at this point, how do you start building a team when you're small, and especially when you're worried about wages?
Well, perfect. That's a great question. When we started, I was literally just, as I said, I did not quit my full-time job. So I still had a full-time job where money was coming in. As I said, the first thing I decided to do when I decided I was going to start the company was put as much money into my 401k as possible, right? Because I'll use that as a funding vehicle. But I also reduced my burn rate tremendously. And what I mean is, like there was no more Starbucks, there was no more, movie going, there's no more eating out, everything. My burn rate was $3,000 a month. And that means that included, mortgage, car payment, everything was $3,000 a month. So that's $36,000 a year post-tax, pre-tax, right? So I mean, my burn rate was really, really low. I wasn't spending a lot of money. Now I remember our first hire was a gentleman named Russell Bowles, right? He's now a director of operations. He came from Georgia Tech, right? And but he was I remember when we hired him, I paid him $50,000 for his salary. And I remember I couldn't sleep for the first half of the night when he signed his offer letter. I couldn't sleep because I was looking at it, I was like, oh my God, this is $50,000. I don't have that. But then I thought to myself, wait a minute though. Sure, it's $50,000, but it's over a year, right? If you divide $50,000 by 52, it's and by 26, because it's by 26 weeks, I mean, it's like $2,000, right? So at the end of the day, it became, I was like, oh, I can do that, right? I can do $2,000, every 2 weeks. The company's making some money. I can use my salary, plus I can also draw down for my 401k. So the thing is, you can't get psyched out by the salary, right? Because you just have to have an understanding that this is an annuity. And so now you talk about building a team. Who's the first person you should hire, right? Now, if I try to take myself back to that time, as I said, I was selling, right? I was always on a plane. I was selling, selling, selling. And I needed to continue selling, selling, selling. So what I needed someone who could, once I sell and close the deal, I needed someone who would take care of everything else, i.e. onboard the client, answer questions, be there for customer success, so I could go out and sell. So when I thought about hiring, the first thing I thought about was, who's the person I need to hire that'll make sure that as I'm selling, I'm keeping the customers happy that I already have. Because you don't want churn in any kind of company, in any tech company. You don't want churn. You don't want them to leave because that money is gone, right? The money you used to acquire that client will be gone, and you don't want that. So that was why we hired, Russell as someone in operations that would take over once I closed the deal. He would now call them and say, okay, now here's how we're going to do setup. And he does that to this day. He leads a team of about 40 people.
Awesome. So, like you said, at first you were still doing your regular day job. So related to that is, when you were first starting, how many hours were you putting in a day or a week into the business? And when did you sort of know to make the shift from, working on it part-time to really sort of making it your full-time thing?
That's an excellent question. I When I started, uh, I knew I couldn't afford to quit my job, right? I knew that it couldn't support us. But then I was working probably 90 hours a week between my day job and this job. And I'll tell you what my schedule was. I would literally wake up at about 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, normally 7. I'd go to the gym, work out. I'd be in my office at about 8:30 for my regular job. Frankly speaking, I'd be done with my regular job in like 3 hours, right? And that's the one thing about corporate America. It's really kind of weird. I'd be done, this is not being recorded, isn't it? First of all. Okay. All right, good. So, I'd be done with my regular job in 3 hours. And from then on, I'd work on, LeaseQuery. And then at 5 o'clock, I'd leave the office. I'd go to Barnes and Noble, which is off of Cobb Parkway. I'd work there from 5 o'clock till about 10 when they closed during the weekdays, or 11 if it was Friday or Saturday. And then I'd go to the Applebee's off of Spring Road and have dinner there. I'd eat dinner and then go to the Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's off of Windy Hill, because it was 24 hours. And I'd work there until about 2 or 3 in the morning. And then I'd go home and pass out and wake up once again at 7. And that was literally my circle. Like, it didn't matter whether it was Monday, Tuesday, whatever day it was, that was my circle. Except I'd probably go to Barnes and Noble's first thing in the morning if it was Saturday or Sunday. Now, I say that to say this. I was working like 90 to 100 hours, per day. It's funny. I was out I was having a conversation with some people the other day, and they were talking about coronavirus and how we're staying at home and watching Netflix. And they're like, have you watched The Wire, HBO's The Wire? I was like, nope. Have you watched Breaking Bad? I was like, nope. Have you watched Silicon Valley? I'm like, nope. And the reason is, even God, what's the one with, everyone always talks about it. God, what's the one on HBO that
Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones. even Game of Thrones, haven't watched it, right? So all these things I hadn't watched because I was so focused. I mean, I was there was no social life, right? And that's why I hadn't seen any. The only thing I would watch on TV was actually Shark Tank. That's the only thing I would watch on TV. No, did not watch The Office. I still haven't. Did not watch The Office. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm catching up on some episodes, so I've seen some episodes of The Office, and I've also realized that I really like. There's another thing that looks like The Office, but it's about community. Uh, I don't know. I can't remember.
Parks and
Parks and
Rec.
Recreation, Parks and Rec, right? I've realized I really like that, right? And I have caught up on Silicon Valley. It's funny because that's exactly how Silicon Valley works. It's the weirdest thing. It's so funny because I can actually relate to it, being in a tech company. So anyway, I was working crazy hours, and what happened? You asked about what made the transition from going, what made the transition from being full time to part time, or part time to full time, was I got sick, right? I got really, really sick, and I have a stress induced illness, right? It's called myasthenia gravis. Now, I'm not sure if any of you on the call have ever seen the show. I didn't know this. I don't watch the show, but God, what's it called? The Empire. There's a show called Empire, right? And Empire was going on at this time when it's the first season of Empire was going on at the time when I was going through this, right? Working both jobs, etc. And I got really sick. I had to take, I mean, like when I say really sick, I had to take a leave of absence from regular work. I had to wear an eye because I was seeing double, double vision. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. Worst time of my life. I went to the Palmer Institute in Miami. They couldn't figure it out. I finally went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which was an amazing experience. Like the Mayo Clinic. God forbid you guys ever get sick, but if you ever do and you don't know what's going on, go there. The Mayo Clinic. I went over there. They diagnosed me with myasthenia gravis. So once I got diagnosed, I told everybody, and I told people at work. Someone at work told me, "Oh my God, if you ever watched the show Empire, in the first season, he thought he was dying. The main character thought he was dying, and he was trying to figure out who his heir was going to be." And they were like, "He has exactly what you have, myasthenia." In the end, it turned out he wasn't dying. He had myasthenia gravis. So it's a disease that it's manageable. As I said, I'm fine now, but I still have to take medication. The reason I say that is to say this: a lot of entrepreneurs out there will tell you, "Oh, you got to work, 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 and sleep when you're dead." Do not do that. Your wealth is your health. At the same time this whole thing happened, Steve Jobs died. Right? If you look at the timing, this was literally at the same time I'm building this thing. Steve Jobs died. And I thought for a second, and I was like, this guy is worth how many billions of dollars, right? How much of his net worth do you think he would have given up to live just one more month? How much of that, I think it was worth 10 or 11 billion dollars. How much of that would he give up just to live for one additional month, right? And so I'm like, it's not worth it. So that was why I quit my job and did this full time. That was the impetus because I got sick. I can't, and honestly, I wish I had done it earlier, because it's one thing when when you do things half and half, part time, that's like having one foot in hot water and another foot in cold water, and you're trying to convince yourself that your body's warm, right? You just can't do that. And so the moment I quit to do it full time, I landed like 10 clients within a month. It was phenomenal, right? And I was like, this is really what I need to be doing.
That's an incredible story, man. I mean, wow. So glad that's behind you and you're doing well. Moving on now to some more fun, personal like fun, not yet. You know what I mean. So at this point you're working full time on LeaseQuery. So what was that feeling like when you got that first check?
The first check, I actually have the first check here. It's I can walk through it to get it, but the signal will go off. But I have the first check that we received. I have it framed. It was from, as I said, fresh to order for $500. And I remember seeing it and going, wow. this is amazing, right? Like, but the interesting thing about that is is the first check was not as big a motivator for me as the fear of failure, right? I don't really know how to explain that. Actually, maybe I do know how to explain that, right? My very first investor, right, was this lady who used to work with me, and she gave me $12,000 in exchange for 10% of the company. $12,000 in exchange for 12% for 10% of the company. And I remember that check. I remember, and I remember feeling this huge, heavy weight on my shoulders. Like, wow, George, it's no longer just your money in here. I have a responsibility to this lady to make sure that I do not lose her money, right? So I felt this heavy burden. So when you compare the two, the check that actually made much more impact to me was the check for $10,000 from this investor. Now, here's the irony of this whole thing. She gave me that check in March 2013. I will never forget the day on September 14th, 2013. It was a Saturday, and my buddies were going to watch a boxing match, and it was Manny Pacquiao fighting somebody from I think Cano, someone from I don't even follow boxing. I don't know, but my friends were like, George, you're always working. You're always working. Come watch this with us. And on my way there, she calls me and said she wanted her money back, right? And I was devastated. I was like, listen, I don't have this money. You're not just killing the company, you're killing me. Why are you doing this to me? And she was like, well, I don't really believe, and I'm about to leave the company to go work at another company, and I need the money. And I'm like, I know you don't need this money, right? I know you gave me this money in March. What happens in March? Bonuses, right? So it's not from your savings, it came from your bonuses. And I know how much you make, right? So why are you doing this? She's like, George, I just want my money back. I mean, this was over the course of a 2-hour phone call. Worst day of my life, but I said, okay, I don't believe I owe you this money back because we have an agreement. But I want us to remain friends. So I will repay you. I don't think I can pay you. I can't pay you $12,000. I just don't have it. But what I can do is I can pay you $1,000 per month for the next 12 months, and you get your money back. And she said, okay, which made me further know that she really did not need the money, because $12,000 in cash is very different from a $1,000 annuity over 12 months. So we agreed on that. And I told her, and I said this verbatim, I was like, just understand, I will pay you your money, but you have to know that I will make it my lifelong mission that whenever you remember this day, you will regret it for the rest of your natural God-given life, right? And, she actually said something nice, which if someone says something that cold-blooded to you, right? She said, I hope so, because then that means, you're successful, right? So that 10% that she got for $12,000 based on our last valuation is about $25 million that she would have gotten, she would have had, right? So that, as I said, that was the worst day of my life, literally, as far as the company was concerned. But it also ended up being a very, very good thing for us, right? So that's one of the lessons I've learned. Whenever things are low and down, believe it or not, you will never believe how you may be smiling and be glad that it happened, right? A couple of years later. And I've told you 2 examples. One was that day, but 2 was my getting sick, right? If I hadn't gotten sick, I would not have quit my job to do this full time. I would still be languishing on, trying to do both things, and neither one would be successful, right? So whenever things bad happen, you just never know. Just take it in stride and know that you don't know why it's happening, but the odds are, the crazy thing is I haven't had a very bad thing happen that didn't turn around to be good, Like I'm trying to think of something that happened that was bad that remained bad, and I frankly can't think of one, right? So sorry, I tend to give long-winded, really crazy long-winded answers. So
No, that's I mean, that's great. Another great story. I have a question here in the chat from Andrew. I don't know if I should say the people's name who are asking the questions, but wanted to give him some credit. What was the most valuable thing you learned while in college here at UGA?
huh, in college at UGA, wow. Well, I think the value of your network, right? The value of your network. Um, so our general counsel, Andrew Jones, also came to UGA, went to UGA. Our CRO, Chris Ramsey, also went to UGA. Our accountant, Tommy Lee, also went to UGA. So those early networks that you're making, those people that you're hanging out with, are the people that you should be able to draw upon in the future. Now, you're not gonna. The crazy thing is, I didn't talk to Andrew well, Andrew and I remained relatively close. Chris and I were roommates, so we remained close. But there's some people that you'll come back to them later in life, right? You'll go your separate ways, right? The reason Chris joined us was I'm not good at sales. I scrapped along and got our first 10 clients, but then Chris came aboard and he had left UGA and done enterprise sales, right? And so he literally by himself built our entire sales operation. Would I have known Chris if it wasn't for UGA? Absolutely not. So they say one of the things to do. I don't know if I agree with this because it makes it seem almost self-serving. But they say look around your when you're in college at this time, right? Because that's what it is. It's not about it's about your network, right? Obviously, getting good grades matter, but the value you're going to get here is in how do you amplify yourself. And they say look around your network and look for those people who, for every dollar they make, you make a penny, right? And those are the people that you really want to surround yourself with, right? For every dollar, think about it. If they make $1, you make a penny. So you need to look for people who show signs of huge potential. And that should be your network, especially a professional network. I'm not saying, you should have relationships. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of self-serving. I'm not saying that, you should be looking for, hey, what can this person do for me? But you should always be looking for ways to expand your network, because those are your true individuals that no matter what, you will continue to be friends 20, 30 years from now. And even if you don't see each other in 10 years, when you do see each other, it'll be another bonding experience.
Awesome. That's some great advice. And, that's something, especially we, the society, that's something we really like to stress. It's a tenet of our mission statement is that we are all about networking. I have another question here from the earlier submitted ones. You mentioned how you sort of got the idea for the company, but have you always had an entrepreneurial mindset, or was it just this problem that it just sort of clicked in you?
So I am kind of a charlatan when it comes to being an entrepreneur or being a CEO. I really believe that. I think that's helped me, right? Because I feel like, listen, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? I've never run a company with 200 people before, right? But that now gets me humble and sets in a sense of humility that tells me, George, you can't do this by yourself. You have to go get people that know how to do this and empower them to make those decisions, right? So and empower them to run the company, right? I like to say I want to be the least powerful CEO in Atlanta, right? I don't want people to come with me with their issues. I want them to go directly to the people that are. If you have a problem with HR, you go to our VP of HR because you know that she speaks for me, right? You have a problem with implementation, you go to Russell because you know he speaks for me. You don't come to me and say, hey, I have a problem with Russell, because then that undermines his authority, right? And next time they'll come straight to me. Right, with their problems. And you really want to empower your people and let them know that they speak for you, right? I think that has been. I'm sorry. That was the question, right? Am I answering the question correctly?
Yeah, it was just sort of like, I guess, um, like, was this always sort of something? Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I haven't always been, I, I've always thought that I would start something or do something, but I never. That was not my mission. My mission was not to find something to do. It was, in fact, right before I got this idea, I was like, I'm sick of accounting. I'm going to go to medical school. So I literally started studying for the MCATs. No, I kid you not. Like literally started studying for the MCATs, and uh, and then got this idea, and I was like, you know what? Let me try this first. If it fails, then screw it. I'll go back. I'll go continue reading for the MCATs, right? It's, the irony is, my ex-wife. I'm divorced. It's another problem. And it's not all glory, right? Imagine I told you my schedule, right? Of how what my day was. Where did I mention a wife or my twin daughters in there? Right? I just had no time for them, and one of the consequences of that is that I'm divorced now, right? But it's for medical school at the same time, and she stuck with it, and she's now a doctor doing her residency at Emory, right? So that would have been my path as well, to do this instead. So anyway, the reason I say it's important to not just look for a business to do, but to actually find a problem that you're obsessed with solving. I think people fall in love with their products, right? Oh, I have this cool thing that I'm doing, right? And you fall in love with that, as opposed to say, you know what is the problem I'm solving, and become obsessed with that, right? That is a big differentiator. Because if you're obsessed with the problem, your solution you'll always be looking for the right solution. If you're obsessed with the solution or your solution, you're always going to be seeking a problem that your solution can't solve. And those are two different places to be within the market. I always say you never want to sell vitamins, right? You never want to sell vitamins. You always want to sell painkillers, right? If I brought you a pill and I said, this is a vitamin, it's a pill that will make sure you never have a headache for the rest of your life. You're like, I'll give you $3 for it. But if you have a migraine, and I come back and I come here with you with an Excedrin, maximum strength, how much would you pay for that? Right? So you always want to sell painkillers and vitamins. And the best way to find a painkiller is to find a true problem out there and be obsessed about it. Right? So the point, to answer the question, I wasn't really seeking I wasn't always entrepreneurial to seek a problem to solve, to start a business. I never thought, oh, okay, I want to start a business. What happened was I found a problem that I was willing to dedicate the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years to solving, right? And that's why I believe we have a successful business today.
Awesome. So I got two more questions here. So y'all in the audience, just feel free to get any more of those last minute ones in. But it's not something you touched upon about your schedule and your sort of day in the life. So now that you're more involved, focusing full time on LeaseQuery, what time best suits you when you get up in the morning? And similar to that, you mentioned you would work out in the morning. So how does that how effective is that on having a good mindset?
Well, working out for me was the first thing that it just gave me stress relief, right? I was under tremendous amounts of stress, which is what caused the illness to begin with, right? So working out for me was a big part of maintaining my sanity, right? As far as my schedule now, yeah, we should talk pre-COVID versus post-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, I'd be in the office at 9 a.m. I'd leave at 5. I try not to work on Fridays, right? Just because I want to take a long weekend and just de-stress, right? What I do on Friday. So I should rephrase that. I try not to go into the office on Friday, right? I stay at home and would just work on answering emails, just things during the week that could fall through the cracks. Post-COVID though, everything is at home, right? And here's the irony, guys. I have this in my house. in February, I was like, I never work from home. I never ever work from home, right? It's just not what I do. And so I'm in my what used to be my office, right now as we speak. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make it a spirits room. Go dogs, right? And so this is what it looks like right now, right? So I pretty much made it a bar. And as I said, this happened in February. What happened in March? COVID hit. And now I don't have an office anymore to work from home because I converted this thing into a bar. Or a spirits room. I like to say bar makes it sound cheap, right? So essentially, the irony here is my schedule has now changed post COVID because now I wake up same time about 9, right? Get on my calls to get my work done, but because I am working from home, it's almost like I am now always working, if that makes sense, right? And that's something that I've realized in me, and so I'm trying to make sure our team doesn't do the same thing, right? Hey guys, at a reasonable time, shut down your laptop and say you are done for the day. That is very difficult to do at home because you're at home, right? Your laptop is there, you're working. Next thing you realize it's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. You're like, geez, I've just been working, right? That's not healthy, right? So what I try to do now is literally just force myself to say, okay, George, 6 o'clock, boom, pens down, which I'm now passing that by 20 minutes.
Yeah, we thank you for giving us some time. Got Taze has a question similar to that. Building off of that, how are you able to sort of stay on schedule? Do you do like checklists or like an itinerary type system?
Well, I now have an assistant. That was life-changing for me, right? Having an assistant that she makes sure I am where I need to be when I need to be there, right? And that has been a game changer. It's crazy the things that you don't realize is taking up your time. I mean, if I show you my email, you will see that I have unread emails. This is just unread emails, right? Of I don't know if you can see that. Well, there's 227,000 12 emails unread. That's unread, right? 227,012 12. So that tells you how much of my time is spent just managing my email. So I need someone to do that. So I don't use a checklist anymore. My assistant, I don't know what her system is, but it's very effective, right? Because she made, if it's not on my calendar, I literally don't know about it. She gets upset with me when I put things on my calendar without consulting her. I mean, like she's like, no, they have to go through me. So everything goes through Kayla. Who probably scheduled this call.
Thanks to her. All right. So we have one more question in the chat here. We're gonna leave the Zoom open for like 5 more minutes after, in case any of you guys have sort of individual questions or want to introduce yourself. So to wrap it up here, Alex wants to know, and you mentioned this a little bit with the story when that investor asked for her money back. What sort of failures did you have, and what and how did you learn from them?
Well, gosh, failures. I mean, I had a lot. I'm trying to think. I mean, a couple of things. With people, like everyone always thinks. I want to call them failures. I'll talk about lessons learned, right? I've learned a couple of lessons along the way, and one of them is who matters the most, right? In an organization, who matters the most? And a lot of people say the customer. You put the customer first. I actually believe it's your employees. You put your people first, right? Because if you do not put your people first, then your commitment to your customers are empty, right? Because there's a very big difference between eating at Chick-fil-A versus eating at McDonald's. Very big difference. That experience is different. because the people are happier at Chick-fil-A, right? The employees are happier at Chick-fil-A. That is literally the driver of the whole thing, right? It's the fact that they put their employees first. They make sure they hire the right people, first of all, and then they make sure they keep them happy and make sure they retain, right? So that is one big lesson that I learned, right? Was you have to make sure that your employees feel that they are valuable and you have their best interests at heart, and as such, they will be loyal to you, right? When a lot of people also say your investors, right? The investors, you should focus on your investors because they're the ones that put money into the company. Guess what? When times are going down, because guess what? When you build a company, it's not like this, right? It's not just a straight line going up. It is dips and then you recover, and then dip and then you recover, and then dip. So it's going like this. In points of these dips, the first people to flee? The investors. The investors are the first people that say, okay, we're going to lock up our wallets. We're not going to give you any loans. We're going to freeze your credit facilities. They're the ones that are going to react first to the market. First. The second people are your customers. Wait a minute. Hold on. Are you trying to say that you won't be able to support us? Yeah, we're gonna look for, we're gonna put this to bid. The people that are gonna stay with you are your employees. Now, if they don't feel welcome or if they don't feel valued, right? The A players, the A plus players that have options elsewhere, they will be the ones to leave first, right? They'll leave. And then all of a sudden, the A plus players leave, and then the A players see the A plus players leave and they go, I should start looking. And then they leave. And then the B players look and say, okay, the A players are gone, I'm gonna leave too. And all of a sudden you're left with a bunch of C players. And how can a company survive with C players? You simply cannot, right? Which is why you should do everything in your power to make sure that you get loyalty from your people, because if you do, they will be loyal to you and they will not jump ship during tough times, because every company is going to have tough times. They will not jump ship. They will stay and tough it out, and that will give you a chance.
Awesome. That's some great advice. You've been dropping knowledge all night. Those are all the questions we got. So I'm gonna pass it back over to Natalie for some housekeeping things. But George, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. I definitely, got some great things to take away. So thank you again. And Natalie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. So yeah, make sure you guys fill out the form for attendance for this event. And also, if you have any questions that you want to ask George directly, we'll stick around on the call for another 5-10 minutes if you have any questions that you want to ask. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See if anyone.
Thank you.